I always find it kind of weird when I run into people who are avid readers but haven't read Stephen King. I don't know why that's weird. I think it's because, or why it's weird to me. I think it's because I've been reading him the majority of my life, and a lot of my friends who are avid readers have read him. And so I come in across people on BookTube who are like, oh, this is my first Stephen King book. I'm like, what? But that's not a judgment. I think it's great that people are discovering Stephen King. I have a story, actually, of when lockdown kind of loosened up around here. We went to our used bookstore, I think it was last summer, our local used bookstore, and the Stephen King, I noticed, section, because of course Stephen King has his own section, they get so many books by him. His section was really, really empty. And so when I went and bought my books, the owner of the store, she was telling me that, if I had any Stephen King books that I needed to get rid of, please bring them in. And that is the complete opposite of what she would say before. And the reason for this, she says, a lot of the high school kids who were at home from school were discovering Stephen King for the first time because they had nothing to do. They were stuck at home, right? And so they're eating up Stephen King books. They were going to her shop and buying all the Stephen King books. And I was like, well, there's a whole other horror part here. But, it's understandable that they go to Stephen King because he's very popular. So maybe you don't know where to start with Stephen King. Maybe you're brand new to Stephen King. And I'm not doing this because of lockdown or anything. I've seen a lot of these videos, and I find they're just fun to watch. And, I have my own list of where people, I think, should start with Stephen King. I wanted to make this list to be sort of like the way most people, my age anyway, came to Stephen King, and that's by reading his earlier works and being blown away by how brutal and nasty they were. But I realized that this is a different time, and there's different tastes, and Stephen King can probably fulfill most people's tastes in his fiction writing. So I also want to note before I continue that I am not, I haven't read everything Stephen King wrote, so if you think there's a book that I missed, it's possible I haven't read it, but put it down in the darkness down below. Recommend me and other people who might be reading the comments. Just recommend what you think would make great Stephen King starter points. So I broke this up into shorter works versus longer works because we all know Stephen King can write those bricks, those murder weapons. And so I'm going to start with the shorter works. And first is one I read recently, and that is Later by Stephen King. I think this is a great starting point because it does introduce the reader to his multiverse. Because as you may or may not know, Stephen King has a sort of universe that books. There's a lot of connections. And his Dark Tower series is where they all come together. But if this is your first book, you're going to get a taste of this, and it directly references one of his other earlier and most popular books. So that was a lot of fun on its own. But you also get a sense of Stephen King's. He tends to write a lot of coming of age stories. I think he's one of the best at doing this because he really connects with me in a way that other writers don't. And so, although I can't say I connected with Jamie, the main character, in Later because I don't live in New York City, and my mom, she's not a literary agent, but it's just the emotions kids go through and stuff like that. You do connect with that. And Stephen King's writing style is, he's got his own writing style, as most writers do, but his is very much more, he just handles his writing like a master, and you're taken along for a ride, and it's the same with all these stories. But Later is just a lot of fun, and it's kind of light compared to most of his other books, as a lot of these shorter works are. So you get the horror, because in my review I forgot to mention, even though it's printed by a crime, they basically publish a lot of crime novels, if not exclusively crime novels. It's still, there is some crime in this book, but there's a lot of horror, and And it even explicitly tells you this is a horror story. The main character, Jamie, tells you that more than once. So, Later by Stephen King, fantastic book. Number 2 is a book that took me by surprise. It's another shorter novella, and that's The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I think this is a good place to start because you sort of get an idea of just King's writing style in this book. I don't think I might be wrong, but I don't think it connects to his multiverse at all. But it is a fun ride. It's about a little girl who gets lost in the woods. She's separated from her family, and she gets lost. And after a while of being, a while of exposure and starvation, she starts to hallucinate her favorite baseball player, Tom Gordon, and he starts giving her advice on how to survive. And there's also something in the woods that's following her. And we don't know if it's a demon or if it's wildlife. So, so it's a good story from beginning to end. If you want something more horrific, I highly suggest The Mist. This is, I think most people have probably seen the movie, but this is very much a Lovecraftian tale by Stephen King. And it involves a group of people who are stuck in a grocery store when this mysterious fog or mist it invades the town, and within the mist are these giant creatures. And these creatures, they're not friendly to humans. They will kill you, as you will see. And so you get the dynamic. This is a lot of what goes on within the grocery store between the characters is very common to what you'll find in other stories by Stephen King. There's just the conflict that they find themselves in. And I love this story, and I think everyone should read it. Moving on, number 4 here, I have Misery. Everyone knows Misery, at least I think they do. If you don't, well then here's your chance to check it out. It's about a writer who's driving in a winter storm, I believe, and he finds himself in an accident, a pretty bad one, where he's bedridden, and he's found by his world's biggest fan, Annie Wilkes. But she pretty much keeps him as a prisoner. While she's nursing him in her twisted way, he lets out that, actually, no, I think he already announced that he wasn't writing his series of books anymore. And so she keeps him and forces him to, write one more of these books. and let's just say Annie Wilkes, she's keeping him prisoner. That right there should tell you exactly what kind of person she is. She's not the most friendly. And, this is a classic. It's going to be a classic, and it is for a reason, and that's why it's on this list. It's very good. I think most people would, a lot of people I know, this was their first Stephen King book, and so it fits, definitely read this one. A couple of collections here before I move on to his longer works. I found that Stephen King's short stories were a great entry point because they can be so much more, especially if you're looking for the scary and the brutal, and sometimes the comically brutal. Definitely read some of his earlier short story collections, like The Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, of which I think it's Skeleton Crew, The Mist is part of. So you sort of get a lot there. And like I said, you get some crazy stuff in those books. There's some very much classic stories in these books that haunt people for the rest of their lives. So if that's something you're looking for, definitely check out the short stories of Stephen King from Night Shift and Skeleton Crew. Alright, moving on to his longer works here. I have another 6 entries. Now, first up, I'm going to talk about It, because It is a lot of people I know, people around my age, who read that one first. And this book, it is an epic tale of like an entity that likes to take the form of a clown, and it likes to eat children, basically. And so you have this group of kids who, the It creature, it comes every 27 or 28 years. So it comes and starts, taking the children while these kids are, when they are kids. And so it takes one of their brothers, little Georgie, and this is like at the very beginning of the book, so it's not really a spoiler. But you know, it's also coming after the rest of the kids. The one thing that's really interesting about this book is it doesn't just take the form of a clown. It morphs into whatever your fears are, and so you have like werewolves, vampires, and all these other creatures, the mummy. And so the kids, they have to battle it again when they're adults. So there's two parts to the book, the kids and then the adults. And like I said, it's epic. It's very literary. There's a lot to this book. There's so many stories within the main story. It's an onion. You peel back all the layers, and then you finally get to the core of the story. It's a masterpiece. So definitely read that. At number 2 here for the thicker books, I have something that's shorter, but I absolutely loved, and that's because I love vampires, and that's Salem's Lot. This book follows, the main baddie, the vampire in this is Barlow, and he's just creepy as hell. And this takes place in Jerusalem's Lot, and I absolutely love the way Stephen King talks about this town, the way he describes it. It actually put me there, and you can visualize this place very well. And I think, if I remember correctly, the 1978 or 79 mini-series they did, the classic one, I think they captured the essence of that town very well, if I remember correctly. But it's very creepy. It's about, the dark and nasty vampires that will suck your blood and kill you and then turn you into a vampire. It's just a lot of fun, and Stephen King handles it like a master as well. He's got like news clippings in there and everything. It's just so much fun. Next up, number 3, I have The Stand. Again, this is a very epic piece of literature. As you know, it's about Captain Trips, the virus that takes out like 97.8% of the world's population. So most people die, and so the survivors, they're forced to confront an evil that's rising. I guess I can't remember if it's because of the plague or if it's just taking advantage of the plague. So it's very much a struggle between good and evil. I really enjoy the first half of the book more because just watching the world kind of die slowly is fascinating. It's not something I want to see. At the beginning of this whole pandemic, we were all thinking of The Stand and Captain Trips, but thankfully it never got that far, at least not yet. So that book is it's mind-boggling how well Stephen King wrote that. Second half I'm not so fond of because it gets into the battle between good and evil. I think it's sort of like watching the movie Titanic just to watch the ship sink because it has historical relevance and it's fascinating. It's the same because you're watching the virus, Captain Trips, take out the world's population. The people who survive it, what they have to go through in order to survive. Not only the people who survived Captain Trips survived because they were immune to it. So they basically have to find food and they have to survive each other, and it's just a lot of fun. Next up is a recent book by Stephen King. I believe he released it either last year or maybe it was 2019, and that's The Institute. I think this is a good place to start Stephen King because it kind of reminded me a little bit of earlier Stephen King from the 80s, except there's no horror. This isn't a horror story. It's more of a thriller, and maybe even a sci-fi thriller. But it's just a lot of fun, but it's also very tense. I found myself anxious while reading a lot of this book because it involves kids who are being held against their will in this institute, and there's a reason for it. It's because they have it's sort of like Stranger Things, the Netflix show, where you have a cast of kids, and although they sort of just meet each other, they become rather tight because they're trying to survive. But you have these kids in an institute, and they're there because they have these abilities, and so like supernatural abilities. So the book is tense, but it's also a lot of fun, and it's a page turner. It kind of reminded me of Blake Crouch a little bit in the sense that it just kept going, and going, and not in a bad way. It was just like the way the plot kept progressing. It was intense, and I absolutely loved my reading experience. I think if you want to get into reading Stephen King, this is a good place to start, because you're going to see how Stephen King can completely capture your attention and not let go, because he's good at that. When he's on his game, he's really good at that. And last but not least is a horror story. Not everyone likes this one, but I think it's a good place to start, because I absolutely love this book. It's not within the multiverse either, at least not that I'm aware of. It's his haunted house or haunted cabin story, and that's Bag of Bones. I love this story because it's just a good story. I found the grief in this story to be very, very powerful, because it's about a writer who loses his wife. She just one day has an aneurysm and dies, and so her death is completely unexpected, and it affects the writer drastically. He can't write anymore. He can't do anything anymore. So he goes to this cabin by a lake where he's hoping to heal and maybe discover writing again, because it's his job. And so he falls for one of the local women there. She's a single mom. There's a lot of weird things going on. For example, his cabin is haunted. And he thinks it's haunted, I think, if I remember correctly, by his ex-wife, his dead wife. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in this book, and the ending I found was one of his better endings. There's some brutal things that happen in this book that's devastating, and so you can read this book and learn how Stephen King can have a very cold heart when it comes to writing his characters. And Bag of Bones, I felt, was a very good haunted house story, and it's very gothic, I think, in a sense as well. So it's been a while since I read Bag of Bones. I've read it 2 or 3 times though, and like I said, I highly recommend it to new readers, because it doesn't bog you down too far into the multiverse. And I don't even think it introduces you to it. It's just a fun haunted house story. It's fairly thick though. It's like 600 pages. Could probably be cut down a bit, but a lot of people like that world building, and I can be one of them. It depends. Alright, so that is my recommendations for your journey into reading Stephen King if you're brand new. And if you are brand new to Stephen King, then welcome. You're about... Every time somebody reads Stephen King and falls in love with him, they want to read all his books. I hope I helped you begin that journey, especially if you find something here that makes you want to read all his books. I think these are strong entries into beginning Stephen King, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, so thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, especially if you're new here and you want more content like this. And like and comment. If you comment, we'll discuss some Stephen King books. And keep being safe out there. Keep being kind, because kindness is underrated. And keep being creative, and I'll keep I will catch you guys in the next bookish video.